You're watching the DevRel Salon. I'm Don Goodman-Wilson. We welcome you to tonight's show. Tonight's going to be a little different than it has been in the past. We are going to have a little more interactive show. I'm going to drop some instructions in the chat for everybody to interact with us, join the conversation. But tonight, I'm going to be taking a step back and let me introduce our two hosts. The first you already know. Joe is a developer community consultant based in Amsterdam. In the past, Joe has helped new and student developers learn with GitHub, PayPal, and Major League Hacking.
Hello.
Say hi to Joe.
I can't believe you did the eye thing.
Also,
thank you so much for having me back.
It's my pleasure. I'm glad to have you back. Also, we have Valériane Vanance. She's a French developer evangelist. She loves Ruby, digital photography, and helping the dev community in any way she can. She's also involved in women's inclusion and IT. Howdy, Val. How are you doing? We don't seem to have your audio, I'm afraid. Oh, you're muted.
And I am not anymore. Hello, everyone. I'm super happy to be here for this first edition for me of the virtual DevRel Salon, and the second, so if you've missed the first one, you can see it on YouTube on our channel.
Well, I'm so glad to have you all here. Just to kick things off, today's topic is a continuation of the one a fortnight ago, virtual events. This time we're going to try to have, like I mentioned before, a more inclusive conversation. We're going to invite folks from the chat into the switchboard where we're running this. So folks, if you've got something to contribute to the conversation, I'm going to drop a link in there. We encourage you to come on and share your experiences, share your perspectives. We are limited to 10 people, so we may have to do some interesting juggling to keep things going if a lot of people decide to show up. We'll see how that works. Yeah, so I'm going to leave it to you two to take it away from here.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, a couple of things I will say for folks who can join the link. If you, it's StreamYard, you're probably familiar with it. It does work best on Chrome. It will be fine on Firefox, but if you can jump on Chrome, that'd be wonderful. And you will not be able to be heard or seen until you are added to the stage. And so as Don has to do the juggling to get you onto the stage, keep an eye on the right-hand side of the screen. There is a little private chat where Don will be trying to chat to you to get you set up and ready to jump on the stage. So when you jump into the room, get straight into private chat and you'll be able to chat with Don over text, and then we will be able to hear you and you will explode onto the stage in a great round of applause, and it'll be wonderful.
Going to be great. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't introduce Ramon, who will be taking notes for us once again. I'm working with Ramon to take extensive notes on each of the sessions that we have using CoScreen to share this Sublime window back and forth. Ramon, you're not in the stream, but you can still say hello. Let's see if he takes a hint.
Ramon is in chat.
Yes, he is.
Oh, there he
is. Too
is.
responsible to vandalize the notes.
I appreciate that, Ramon. Thank you. All right, I'm going to drop out and let you two take it from here.
Wonderful.
Yes.
This is fun. So I guess we're gonna Don is gonna post that link soon. But in the meantime, Val, for folks who are new to DevRel Salon, because this is the second time it's been online and they may not have attended a physical event, you're involved with the physical DevRel Salons in Paris. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Actually, since Don moved in Amsterdam, I took care of the DevRel Salon in Paris. So we've been running multiple events in person, and we actually didn't do anything since the COVID crisis happened. So I'm so glad that it went virtual.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's I think that's a great place to kick off this particular show with an event coming. I guess it's been straight up over a year since y'all had a Paris event, right?
Yes, I think it was summer 2018, something like that. Yes.
Whoa, okay, multiple years. It's so great that we were able to kick this off again. Oh, hang on one second. Our other co-host has arrived.
Oh.
has rocked up on Discord, so we'll get them into here. So, folks, the StreamYard link is now in the chat. If you jump onto that, it will open in a browser, obviously, and it's like a virtual streaming platform. It's as easy as joining a Google Meet or a Zoom. It will detect your webcam and your mic through your browser. Don't be scared. Come and join us. We would love to hear about your virtual experiences. We do have we basically have the same topic list as we had 2 weeks ago, but as Don said, we want to get everyone's input and experiences into that. And I guess whilst we're waiting for people to join us, let's start with Val, your opinions and experiences for virtual events. So I know that obviously you are, practicing DevRel, and so I imagine you've been up to your eyeballs in virtual events these last couple of months, and in fact, actually, I can't believe it's this year. In fact, it's now a year. What has your experience with virtual events been so far?
Actually, I haven't been to that much virtual events, and
Cool.
I think the main reason for that is because I tend to feel like it's still missing a thing, and that it's going to be mature at some point, but at the moment it isn't bringing the whole experience. Also, I found myself thinking that hackathons were a good event to virtualize. As it was easier to create interaction between the participants because they are to work together. So definitely easier. But I also think that there are very good initiatives about how to create the experience. And I think we'll talk about it later, but I've got a good example of a software I like to use, and that kind of recreates a bit of this feeling, that we're all missing.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned hackathons. I actually heard from some of the folks behind Major League Hacking, like when their first kind of raft of virtual hackathons had gotten out there, that they were actually seeing really fantastic results, but they were surprising in that they were seeing like people engage with parts of hackathons that were less popular in the physical space had now become very popular in the virtual space. So like sponsor promotions, for example, were like much more popular at virtual hackathons and physical events. And their theory is that there's not as much like person-to-person distraction, and so people were looking for other things to do. But it is really interesting to think. So I think our other co-host is in the StreamYard.
Yes.
Dan, when you're ready, I think Don is looking for your signal, but otherwise. So you said that you haven't jumped into virtual events yet because you feel like there's some things that aren't quite there. There's Dan. Hello, Dan. How are you doing?
Hey.
Hey there. How you doing? Thanks for letting me come a little bit late. I was literally just in a virtual event.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. So we'll jump straight in with that. But before, because you came in a little bit late, you didn't get Don's wonderful intro, so I will intro you now. Dan used to be a day labourer, and now he does computer things for a living. He's attended and organised a lot of community events over the years, and is looking forward to doing them in person again soon. And amen to that. What virtual event have you just been at?
I was at it was a joint HashiCorp thing. I work for a company called Datadog, and we do a lot of content with another company called HashiCorp. And we were just doing a bit of a demo on multi-cloud deployment, computer, something. So yeah, it was fun.
Perfect. Well, now that you've said that, I'm going to victimize you on it. So what was the format? Tell us about how this virtual event was a virtual event.
Right. So this definitely fell more into the classic webinar model, to be perfectly fair, right?
Yeah.
So, there was a video panel, and it was full disclosure pre-recorded because that's a thing.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, we did live Q&A, and the questions came in from the audience through a question asking panel. We were the only ones that could see the questions, so we cherry picked the questions that we wanted to ask. Then we answered them, and when we hit the time limit, we stopped. So would I call this a virtual conference in this? Is absolutely not, right? It's a webinar in the sense that we know them certainly in the pre-COVID world, right? So not much was changing there. Yeah.
Interesting. Cool. There's a bunch I want to dig into on that, like your like I guess disclaimer that like it's a webinar and like it's pre-recorded, and like the almost like distancing of that from an event is really interesting to me, because I think like I actually wanted to ask you about this in particular related to DevOps party games and to what extent virtual events have unlocked some new formats and allowed like things that maybe weren't possible in the physical space. And so that is really interesting to me as like why you felt you needed to disclaim that and like what it is that made that feel less of an event. Does that make sense? Do you get where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I hear you going with that. And I guess for me, coming from, a bit more of a background of going to live events, I was effectively a professional conference goer for a couple of years, right? And that, and I'm being a bit flippant about it. I did other things, but literally having the privilege and the honor of flying around the world and meeting people and going places and whatnot, and then to have the brakes basically pumped on that and to not do that anymore has been kind of rude. And, I still draw a distinction between events and webinars in a way that maybe some people don't, because I have a background in the experience of going to a lot of live events. Everything from, little meetups that I could literally walk down the street, 10 people and a case of beer and some pizzas, talking shop, all the way up to, one conference that over 10,000 people in the audience. I mean, it was ridiculous, right? So, and that to me feels very different from sit in front of your computer while people watch a pre-recorded video. And then type some questions out that I will read if I feel like it on the stream, right? Those materially feel very different to me. And that's why I hesitate to use the same terminology to describe both of them.
Right. So what, in terms of virtual events, so like what if anything so far moved you closer to that feeling that like an event? Is it the previous, like if you were doing it live, would it feel more like an event? Is the stage fright something that you need for it to feel like an event, or is it purely the interaction and like having some space to chat to attendees?
That so there's actually in your question there's a couple of things to unpack there. And I might address actually that first one that I had that made me smile there, which is stage fright. I mean, what is stage fright fundamentally, right? And this is something that I workshop on when I do public speaking, workshops. What is stage fright? Let's actually break that down. Now, there's a bunch of ways to, imagine the audience is not wearing any clothes, or all this ridiculous advice maybe hear over the years, right? But I like to drive right at it. I go like, what is it, right? What is it? Are you actually scared? Are you excited? You're both. Is it adrenaline? Is it endorphins? Is it a fight or flight response? It's all these things, right? And then look, why is that happening? Right. And as a technologist, I'm trained to drill down on the whys, right? Why are you getting the endorphins? Why are you getting the adrenaline? Why are you excited? Why are you frightened? Why are you all these things at the same time? And almost inevitably, with the exception of, sort of edge cases around, I don't want to get too personal because, but edge cases, let's say. For most people, it's, the fear of just, getting up in front of a group of people you don't know, or even worse in some cases, people you do know, and feeling foolish, right? Nobody likes to feel foolish, right? You never want to feel like you're letting people down. You want to do a good job, and you want people to feel like they appreciate what you're doing and appreciate you. And you think that if you make a mistake, or you say the wrong thing, or even worse, you don't know what you're talking about, you'd be exposed as a fraud. What's really happening there is that you're letting people down, and you're letting yourself down. And that in almost every single case is where that fear comes from. Right? And that doesn't go away in the online world. It doesn't.
That is so
Absolutely.
true.
Yeah. So that's a definite parallel, right? All the other stuff around, like being on stage and having lights and having an audience and they're clapping and there are cameras and, you're sweating and it's gross. That obviously is not the same, right?
Well, I think the sweating is the same for me. Anytime I'm doing anything public, it's disgusting.
but the fear of letting people down and the fear of letting yourself down, that's still very real.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Have you had to do, so you mentioned that you do public speaking coaching. Have you done any of that in this era and had to confront, like, have you had to get into what's different about public speaking on stage versus virtual at all during this time?
So this is extremely timely. In fact, it was almost a year ago to the day when we were doing our public speaking workshop kickoff. And we were going to be doing a multi-city tour. And we had all our cohorts lined up. And I was getting ready to get on a plane. And airport shut down.
Boom.
Right? In Europe, right? The United States lagged, a little further behind, right? But no one could leave, no one could go anywhere. And it put our plans on hold because nobody knew what was going to happen. And so we had to shelf that program. And as it became apparent that this wasn't something that was just going to go away on its own, and that we were entering a bit more of a longer term sort of a situation, it sort of came up again. Well, like, should we continue to do the public speaking workshop? I mean, is that even relevant anymore? And a lot of people, including myself included, right, had to rethink how it is that we think about our jobs, how we think about how we interact with the world around us, and then by extension, how we think about ourselves, right? For better or for worse, most people's identities is at least somewhat wrapped up in what they do for a living, right? And in my case, it's extremely wrapped up in what I do for a living, which is probably something I should unpack with a therapist sometime, but that's the truth, right? And to have to go from this traveling around the world and public speaking, blah, 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 to not doing that was quite difficult.
Right.
Fast forward to literally today, we have decided this is a thing we're still going to do, and we had our kickoff today internally. We're going to be doing the public speaking workshop again, and it's going to be about,
that's awesome.
Yeah, about doing it online. And a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here today, right now, that we're going over is the stuff that we're talking about internally in the materials as well.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for this feedback. I see we're having another Dan to invite.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey.
How's everyone doing?
Glad to have you
I'm
here.
wondering
Fantastic.
if like
Hey there, Dan.
2 Dans were too much. Lots of Dan energy.
You are always welcome. Would you like an introduction? Would you like to introduce yourself, Daniel?
Yeah, pretty short. I'm Daniel. I do DevRel at Strappy. That's it.
Hello, Daniel.
Oh, there is far more than that. Yeah, I'm so excited you're here.
Yeah, we'll keep it here at that for
Yeah.
now.
Perfect. So you've jumped in very kindly. Was there any topic that you jumped in particular for, or would you like us to move on to our first topic of conversation? What are you excited to speak about?
Yeah, I was just really excited about the conversation. I think you can move on, and then I can chime in when
Perfect.
I feel like it's relevant.
Awesome.
Sorry,
Cool.
Dan, for stopping you in your tracks, by the way.
No, it's a
that was perfect.
conversation. No worries.
Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
This
so
was a great.
let's ask you a question.
Sorry, Conval.
Yeah, so let's ask you a question. It's a conversation. Do you have an idea of how to recreate what's missing in virtual events? Do you have examples of that, or do you have thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, my opinion is I don't think virtual events can sort of recreate or try and mimic in-person events. I feel like when we stop pretending that they are, then we can actually get value from them, because I think it's super different just looking at a screen and feeling like that's a personal connection. I think it's very different from, being close to someone and meeting them in person. That's my very short opinion on that. So yeah, I feel like people should try and build out their own sort of engagement for virtual events, taking advantage of what it gives. I haven't seen too many people do that, and I'm trying to do it myself. So
That's
how's everyone
awesome.
else navigating that.
I was wondering what benefits do you see only for virtual events that wasn't there in the real world and that you're taking advantage of?
I think you can reach more people. And I guess by default, virtual events are much more inclusive in terms of the people who can attend these events. It's something that I feel particularly strong about, having not been able to attend certain events because of my location at some point. So I think virtual events make it much more open for anyone around the world to attend and be part of the conversation. I mean, this is a really good example. I don't think with a week's notice I could have made it to Amsterdam for DevRel Salon. So
Very good point.
Well, to be fair, even with a week's notice, I couldn't have made it to Amsterdam anyway. Travel restrictions are in place. So.
yeah. So
I liked what you said about being able to reach more people. This is definitely one of the interesting outcomes from this year that I think is, I don't want to say it's going overlooked because it's not going overlooked, but is maybe being understated, which is that with all of the, big old air quotes here, downsides of having to do things online and so on and so forth, which we could unpack later. But one of the huge upsides has been exactly that, has been accessibility, right? Events that I've been attending over the course of 2020 have been, the composition in terms of the audience and the attendees and also the speakers has been frankly quite different than in-person events I've attended in years prior. And it's precisely because, so I'm here in Paris, and I expect most people that are coming to events here in Paris are going to be either from the city or from the country or from somewhere nearby. And same composition for the speakers as well. But events that I was involved in 2020, we've had speakers from, we had speakers from South Africa at one event. We had speakers from Iran at an event, right? We had speakers from French Guyana, which is France, but it's real far away, right? And that wouldn't have been realistic prior to just accepting that, hey, we're doing this online, and maybe there are new doors that are being unlocked and new potential that we have that we didn't have before as a result.
Yes, definitely. This is a huge thing. And that just raised me a question. Like, do you think some people were able to jump into speaking, like technical speaking, because they were behind the computer? Do you have examples of that? Because I know some of us are introverts. I think many of us are introverts. And I think that maybe having like what we feel as a barrier can maybe feel like something beneficial to some persons.
I take it by the science that no one can think of any explicit examples of that happening, but I agree. I could definitely see that being the case. I think there's it definitely, like, I think part of that's also lowering the barrier is like a big part of it. Like, if you're already scared of speaking, the idea of that you then know of like, then trekking to go to an event and having to stand around waiting for your talk, there's like a lot of things up to that moment. Whereas if for a virtual event you can show up and do it and then go curl up in the corner and take whatever time you need. So I agree that I imagine that would be a case. I'd love to hear from someone if that is the case for them. I imagine for a lot of the crowd and for the people in this room, we have probably done less speaking than we did in the times before, just because of the lower frequency of events. But so yes, I don't know if I could speak to that.
Definitely, definitely spending, I don't want to say spending less time on talks, because if you've ever gotten up on stage in front of a group of people with some slides and talked even for 5 minutes, that's hours and hours of preparation minimum, right? And somewhat paradoxically, the shorter the talk, in some cases, the longer it takes, right? So I've definitely spent the same amount of time on any one presentation I did over the course of the year, but without having to fly around, without having to worry about the logistics of tickets, and without having to travel between places, and that's definitely reduced the amount of hours that I would spend on a speaking opportunity, right? And an interesting side effect of that has been that I've been able to kind of just do other things with my time, right? That I wasn't really able to do prior to that. I was able to, and I don't mean like hobbies and stuff like that. I always try to make time for that. But I mean, even professionally, I was able to expand my horizons a bit and learn new things, get better at some stuff, right? That I just wouldn't have had time to do otherwise. So that was a surprising outcome of going virtual, was that I ended up having more free time, quote unquote. Now, of course, it filled up immediately, but I had it, which I didn't have before, which was cool.
If it's okay if I jump in, I want to throw in some things that are happening over in the chat. Not if you don't want to join us up here on the stage, of course you're very welcome to join us in chat, and we'll throw those opinions in. Floor said that they've actually done more speaking hosting events this year, and big part of that has been with not having to travel as much, and having a kiddo at home, it's been easier to do that. So that's fantastic. Suzanne, on the flip side, has done literally no speaking, but has been working on some various online event thingies that has taken up a lot of Suzanne's time. That is very mysterious, and I hope we get to hear a little bit more about that. They followed up further and said lots more time invested reaching and engaging versus just showing up. Love to hear that. And Don said, I've attended a lot less, mainly because of employment situation, but has done more speaking because of traveling. It's a good balance of different experiences going on as a result of different travel. So I guess, do we want to move on to the next topic in our list, Val? What do you think?
There's actually an item there I think is actually super interesting, and of course I have opinions on it, but I don't want to monopolize it. I am interested to get a feel from other people, actually, what their experience is. And it was around that comment of reaching and engaging versus just showing up, right? I don't want to give away my experience and position on that, but I would actually like to dig in on that, because I think that's a really interesting and powerful data point, especially for those of us who kind of do this for a living. How has going virtual changed that balance of just showing up, doing a talk, and leaving, versus sticking around and actually engaging in more meaningful ways? Thoughts on that?
Yeah. So you have opinions other Daniel?
Again, I don't want to monopolize. I'm genuinely interested to hear what other people's thoughts are.
I'm not sure I have
Firefox trouble.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, you can hear me?
We can hear you, yeah. We can hear you totally fine.
Oh, okay. So my screen's frozen and I cannot see anything, but for some reason I can hear you. Okay. So sorry, I was trying to sort those out. What was the question?
Can you run us through it again, Dan?
Sure. So the question was around a comment from the Twitch stream. Thank you, by the way, to the audience on Twitch. These are great comments, great questions. It was around investing time in reaching and engaging with the audience versus just kind of showing up, right? As we've all been guilty of just swooping in, doing a talk, and leaving in the past. So no one's casting the first stone. But how has going virtual affected that balance of spending the time and engaging versus just showing up, doing the thing, and leaving?
I think, yeah, that's definitely something that I've seen happen. One thing I know is that in-person events, of course, feel very personal, and being there seems like it's enough, even though I don't think it is. I feel like outside giving your talk, there's a lot of interaction that you can have with the community that you're presenting to or interacting with in in that event. And with virtual events, there's this feeling that things are much less personal, and staying there you're trying to mimic somewhat some personal interaction that you think you lost through not being there in person. And I've seen a lot more people engage with people either via chat, try and compensate for what they feel is lost in the speaker to crowd interaction and relationship. I don't know what everyone else feels about that. That's been my observation, at least.
Actually, Don says in the chat that for him it's been lots more of just showing up. And I kind of feel the same, because before I jump into a virtual event, I'm just at home in my daily environment. And it just feels like, okay, I'm just opening this virtual door and now I'm here. And yeah, I don't know, it just as like, okay, on off modes, and yeah, it feels like I'm just showing up here on camera.
Yeah,
But I also do agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, sorry. I feel like it depends also on the format and like the type of event. If it's like a 30-person conference and there isn't much interaction that the organizers are being intentional about in terms of like Q&A or panels or anything, I feel like just showing up is enough at some point if they don't do more to create a platform for attendees to ask questions and engage, versus something more intimate like this, where like I literally can't just show up because I'm having these conversations with people in the chat and with everyone else on the stream.
And I think that's a perfect pivot to go to what were your favorite tools to do online events. Do they have something special, a functionality that some doesn't have? What are your thoughts? In the chat, you're also welcome to answer this question.
So I would say that, every tool I've used so far to do online anything in terms of webinars, conferences, blah, blah, blah. And it has nothing to do with 2020 as a period of time. This is just a universal, is that it's all trade-offs, right? Different platforms are going to give you different features, and the different functionalities are going to be designed to encourage certain types of behaviors and discourage others, right? Some are purpose-driven, some are generic, some, were designed for you to watch people play video games on top of. Some were designed for people to have meetings on behind, corporate firewalls. And no matter what platform you're on, something is going to work really well, hopefully, and something is going to work like garbage, probably, right? And for me, it's been a lot more. I have felt much more affected by that reality over the course of the last year, really than ever, right? For obvious reasons, I guess. But if you're talking about an in-person thing, right? An in-person thing can happen in a bunch of different contexts. It could be, in a theater. It could be in an office room somewhere. It could be at a bar. It could be at a park, right? But the dynamics are, the fundamentals of it aren't necessarily that different. You're getting a bunch of people together, and somebody is going to be in a position where the attention's on that person for a period of time. That person's going to say some things. Maybe there's going to be some slides or something. Maybe there's not. And then that person's not going to be the center of attention anymore, and someone else is going to be the center of attention for a while. And in between those attention centering moments, the audience or the people that are involved will just sort of mix in between themselves and do what humans do, right? Which is chit chat or not, and that's it. And that scale, that those fundamentals are the same whether you scale up to thousands of people or 5 people, right? Whereas with online events, you are so heavily affected by the platform that you're using to deliver that that the fundamentals in some cases can be completely different. And that has a big, big, big effect on the experience, and a big, big effect on like what you're trying to do as a conference, or as a, I don't know, an event organizer, as a speaker, as a sponsor, as an attendee. The platform has an outsized influence on your experience. And I've yet to see one get it correct, to get it right, but maybe it's because it's impossible, right? It depends what you're trying to accomplish and how close can you get to whatever goal that is.
Yeah, huge agree on that. Just want to quickly interrupt for a quick reminder as people come in and out of chat, because I realise Twitch chat doesn't have history. We have a StreamYard link going around in chat. That is the StreamYard link for this very stream. You can jump in anytime and join the conversation. If you can jump into that, if you click on that link and open it in a browser, preferably Chrome. Hey, there's Gene right on cue. Preferably Chrome will get you in here. And when you join, keep an eye on private chat, because Don, who is in the background, will make sure that you're all in and situated and you get added when you like. So in that case, welcome, Gene. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I am Gene Chorba. I lead developer relations over at Riot Games. We do, Joe and I have talked a lot about this. We do a slightly different version of developer relations than most everybody else, because we work in the entertainment industry. But we have obviously some of the same pain points as every other DevRel program in the world.
Awesome. So we were currently talking about, this rather heady topic of what does it mean to, engage in an event and contribute more to it than just showing up and speaking. Before I ask you for your take on this, Gene, I want to quickly throw in some stuff from the chat. Flora said it's been super visible when people just rock up for their talks. It is anyway at a physical event, but with virtual events, it's recorded for posterity, and speakers struggle with references, the tools, the way the platform works, so you can really tell who hasn't spent time debriefing and preparing. I guess that's it's interesting in that, I think because it is you can turn up to a virtual event just for your talk in a way that you can't for a physical event. It probably is easier for people to shoot themselves in the foot and really give it away if they haven't done the prep work. But anyway, Gene, would love to hear what you think of this topic.
Sure. No, on that one specifically. So with us most DevRel programs, you go out and you are trying to acquire users very heavily, or you're going to go to conferences to speak, to get people to know about your product, or being things like that. With something like Riot Games or like a Spotify or an entertainment industry, that's not literally as much a concern to go speak and acquire users. So we don't do as much public speaking, or before Corona, we would not pay to go to conferences, or we would not pay for employees to go speak at conferences, because we didn't see value add as much there, especially because we launched 5 games last year, and we were prepping for that, and our internal work was more insane than our external work. But this year with COVID, I've been able to go give speeches where I would never give speeches before. The fact that I can do a 11 a.m. meeting and then at noon pop into a talk at the University of Kuala Lumpur, and then go back at 1 p.m. and go speak at do my meetings at the office is incredible. I am now being able to give talks in countries that would take me 3-4 days worth of travel time, visas, etc., to get to there. Or massive amounts of time lost for me in the office. Because I run basically product as well here. And so it's if I leave for 3 days or 4 days, it is a huge setback. But me being able to go speak for an hour is incredible. And I really, really appreciate that from COVID. And I hope that part continues, because I think that there's a lot of really interesting knowledge out there that is in major cities, and they can't travel as much as they want. I posted yesterday on Twitter about Kelsey Hightower 6 years ago, flew into Atlanta, Georgia to do a speaking meetup for 6 people. It was me and 5 other people about Kubernetes. And he didn't have to do that. Google didn't have to pay for that. But every single person there is now heavily involved with the Kubernetes space and continues to do stuff with Kubernetes and everything. And so it was very powerful to see this person who was leading the charge there come and speak there. And I think we can do that with a lot more stuff in the DevRel space where we can get some really interesting conversations happening and share that knowledge in places that it doesn't exist right now.
That is awesome. And I think one of the things that we mentioned 2 weeks ago in this meetup that I was excited about the possibility of virtual meetups for was like, increasing sustainability. And this is definitely something I hear, like, exactly what we were saying about, like, is it worth 3 days of round tripping for a short engagement at a conference? I think just, opening up those possibilities to more people is huge, but also like increasing the sustainability of the programs that are already doing it, I think it's something that's very close to a lot of people's hearts here. So we've got Daniel back. Welcome back, Daniel.
Thanks. Firefox decided to give up on me, so happy I'm back.
It's all good.
But building on what Gene said, I was thinking about that quite a lot. I think I was just very outwardly sharing my thoughts on how when you talk to people now, it's like, oh, hey, someone invested in my company, or, I met someone, and then, like, 2 years later, I met them at an event, and 2 years later, they hired me or they did something for me. I feel like, really, my thoughts are virtual events creating like situations where, interactions like that can happen, or relationships like that can be built, where in 2, 4, 5 years from now, people will be like, oh, I attended this virtual event with this person, and now they hired me to, lead their developer relations program, or, they invested in my company. I really don't see that happening, and maybe I'm just being a pessimist, but I'd love to know what everyone thinks of that.
I can definitely see that. Like that there's, like, one of the reasons I got into DevRel was, like, I found out I was already doing it, and then Joe and I hung out at multiple conferences, and he was like, yeah, you're doing DevRel, you just don't know what the title of this job is, about like 8 years ago. But I
8 years ago? What?
It was 8 years ago. It was a really, really long time ago. Yeah, Joe. I get what you're saying. I do think that we're not going to see people gain the same amount of like that, where it's like you go to a conference and you just spend 3 straight days or 2 straight days talking to DevRel folk about what's going on, like understanding what they're doing. But I think that we have created a gateway to people, because of what's going on, to be able to get more public speaking engagements, get more involved, be more willing to talk community-wise, because there's less of a commitment for them. Like with something like traveling to a conference, there's a lot of people I know who are like, I don't like travel, or I don't want to speak in front of a crowd, but like put them in front of a Zoom meeting and they're willing to, they can speak about anything for a long period of time. So I think that we may see a split off of people who specialize in this type of thing, or find that they really enjoy speaking or have been really involved because of like the fact that they can do these things. Like Riot's opened up like us to being able to speak at pretty much anything we want now because of COVID, where it's like, you used to see us at like 5 or 6 major gaming conferences, but if like now it's like if UCLA or any college in the world is like, I'm doing a gaming conference, you could probably get one of our lead game designers to pop in for 15 to 30 minutes and talk about like, why do they make decision-making process? And I'm sure it's like that for engineering companies around the world. And all of these people, I don't think that experience, if they enjoy it, goes away. I think they will continue to want to do those and seek those out in a post-COVID world.
It's actually a pretty important observation to generalize, if I may, which is that what we're seeing now in terms of events of various description moving to a fully online format is not going to disappear, and nor should it, right? And somewhat ironically, I guess, this has always been possible. And in fact, there are long-standing events that have been 100% virtual for years. One of the big ones is All Day DevOps. Right? It's 36-hour conference that happens, 1 hour in every time zone around the world, right? It's actually really cool. They've been every years. So it's not as if this model didn't exist. It was just extremely underutilized, right? And all these good things that we're talking about, and all these advantages that we're talking about, and whatnot, there's no reason that's going to go away once COVID does, right? That to me doesn't make sense. So the question then really becomes, and I mentioned this in the chat, becomes one of a value proposition, right? Literally, what is the value that's being proposed by these different models, by these different platforms? What are we trying to accomplish? And when I say we, I mean literally every element of the equation, right? The person organizing it, the person selling the service, the person buying or registering for a ticket, the person watching the stream, the person presenting in front of the camera, et cetera, is not necessarily going to be the same. To illustrate, if you are a big sponsor of like reInvent, for example, like why would you do that? Why would you pay an exorbitant amount of money to get floor space at reInvent and a big booth and staff it with all your people? Very expensive, hotels, food, everything. Why are you doing that? There's only one reason, right? You're generating leads. It's the lead generation activity. And beyond that, reInvent in particular is a great sales activity. If you're a big player, right? You go to reInvent, you get ink on contracts come out of that. So that's the reason you go, right? Those things are not part of the value proposition of a 15-minute Zoom session for a college somewhere, right? And to conflate the two is dangerous. And I think to come back to what Daniel mentioned actually earlier, which is we have to be honest about what we're doing and why we're doing, and really think about the intentionality, if that's a word, of these activities.
Yes, definitely. And there is a very good comment in the chat that just popped in your screen, which was from Susan Daniels saying, can you pop it again? I just lost it. Oh, yes, here it is. Creating relations is harder, but creating an experience may be easier. And I think it's different outcome to get out of it. Do you have experiences to share about that? I have one if you want, but I'll let you go first.
No, go for it, Val.
Okay, cool. By the end of the year, I just wanted to send gifts to developers. And so I could just have created a form and just send that virtual form to developers. And that's it. And then I ended up just creating a parkour using API my company is working for, but they ended up like using their phone, computers, and many things. And I also seen that many people are creating scavenger hunts these days. And I also feel like there is a sense of it in all the virtual events. And this also brings the question of what is a virtual event? Like, since you're doing something, it's an event happening for you. So yes, that's my thoughts. Jean, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. As a gaming company, events are what we do. So I love the idea of digital events. Like every April Fools, our DevRel team builds out like a fake game or fake APIs or fake systems that require some people to learn. Like it's for everybody who comes through our dev ecosystem, but they're easy enough for like the general player base to try and figure out sometimes. And so we'll have
many of them.
yeah. So like a few years ago, we did one where it was like you hit this API and it shows your rank in game and compares you to, or like gives you like a little thing that like we tell you about how you are or whatever. And people, all it was random. It was completely random about what it was going to be, and people didn't but it was close enough to to enough people that it like went super big on our subreddits and everything else, where people were super involved, and it got people to really like build more culture around our program and be involved in that type of stuff. So I am a big fan of doing experiential things. I think it's like we've seen like the rise of things like Clubhouse and other things where it's like, here's how you get together and have a conversation and do stuff. And I think they have their place, but I don't think they bring that, what you're talking about, that experience type thing where that gives you so much more.
Actually, I think it has to be on the organizers. Honestly, from the DevRel perspective, we already are funding these. And I think we can also be involved as players or having roles into that experience. But I really do believe that it isn't us to do it specifically for an event. Like, I think if you want to create some experience in our virtual booth, that is definitely okay, because we can work for it and then bring that experience to every attendee that is coming to our virtual booth. But if it's very specific to a conference, I really do feel that, well, let's talk about money. Honestly, sponsorship prices haven't been really, they haven't been so lower than before, but the experience and the outcomes of it really aren't the same. So yeah, I definitely, I'm inviting every conference organizer to create more experience for their attendees with the money that we give. And I'm definitely willing to help them there, because yes, we should create great experiences, and we have many tools to do that. Since everyone has internet, like, it's a very good starting point.
That's an excellent observation about about sponsoring events and just the brass tacks of the issue. And I've definitely seen some, especially community events, which I'm fairly heavily involved in, around DevOps days and other sorts of things, where if they're still happening and they're doing it online, the sponsorship packages in some cases are down in the hundreds of dollars or hundreds of euros, because they're just like, we just need a little bit of money to cover our bandwidth and some licensing, right? Which is fine. But there are definitely other conferences which are just, we're exciting to move into this new online format and blah, blah, blah. And it actually costs more for some reason. Weird. And as you said, the outcomes as a sponsor are not the same. Let's call it what it is. And I strongly suspect that this is a sign of things to come, where we're going to see how things shake out, especially next year in the conference space. One of the predictions is that hyper-local events are going to be huge again, in a way that they used to be. Anybody remember user groups, right? Those are going to be huge again, right? Because there'll still be issues with traveling. There's still going to be issues with all sorts of stuff, right? Plus, there's just going to be I think a yearn for it, a taste for it, right? Be local, do local. So those are going to explode. And then all the stuff that's at the extreme high end, right? I talked about reInvent earlier. The stuff like at that level, right? E3, et cetera, big, massive events. Those are just going to come back, but even bigger and even badder and even better, quote unquote, right? It's all that stuff in the middle, right? It's all that, 1,500 person conference, thrown by a company that does nothing except do conferences, where every single speaker's paid slot, et cetera, which was a huge industry for a very long time, and not just in technology. I strongly suspect that those are going to disappear, because those conferences that have been trying desperately to go online in 2020 and failing, I don't see them making it out of the year.
So I do want to jump in on something you said a little while back, which I think is a different place to where we ended that, but I want to give people an opportunity to speak on it, which is the value of sponsoring. I want to go back to that a little bit, because this is something that we hit on quite hard 2 weeks ago, and I think it's one of the topics that people wanted to be able to input in on. So again, just a reminder, if you're in the chat and you want to input on this topic, the StreamYard link is going by. I'll put it in there again. Don, just put it in there again. But if you have opinions and experiences about how sponsoring events, there go, Don's put it in there, about how sponsoring events has been for you in the virtual space, and you want to share that opinion, please jump in. You are very welcome to. We'll get you up on the stage. But thank you, Dan. That was awesome. I just wanted to open that floor on the back of that. Yeah, the hyperlocal thoughts, Don. So go on.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Go for it.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I want to agree with what everyone said. I think I'll start out with saying I think we need to be honest about why we sponsor events and what we go for. I think virtual events have sort of taken that veil out, and I think it's manifested itself in the fact that sponsorship tiers haven't gone lower, because we really want to reach people. Most people at least want to reach people. And I love what Suzanne said about experiences are much easier, but relationships are harder. And it's much easier to reach people and sort of give them this experience, or at least that experience of making them aware of you as a company. And most haven't invested in the experience of building relationships. And that's where I really agree with Dan when he says like hyper-local events will be super big, because we're learning from our mistakes and we'll be more intentional about how we go ahead with events. And hyper-local events are much smaller and make it much easier to build these relationships that some people want. So
I'm very curious about the hyperlocal model. I think if it does happen, which I very much agree, we're going to see more and more of that, especially with COVID, like restrictions and travel restrictions and everything like that. I think that hyperlocal has a very big negative in that if there is not a culture of doing events and doing things in a certain place, it's basically not going to happen unless someone really, really steps up. Versus like if you're in a major city or a place that already has an infrastructure set up for doing something like that, you're going to see lots of events, or you're going to see people who like have strong leadership for events, which we're going to see potentially further fragmentation of like people with tons of knowledge and people with not a ton of knowledge about how the industry, technology, et cetera, works out.
So that's interesting, right? Is it a question of impetus? Is it a question of experience? Is it a question of having that culture? And yes, there's definitely those things. But given the choice between not having events at all and getting off your butt and organizing a meetup, I suspect that more people will be incited to at least try, right? Maybe in a place where there wasn't that culture before, people will have more of a reason now to try, because they can't just go, oh, whatever, I'll just drive to the nearest big city, or I'll just get on a train and I'll go to whatever events they're doing. We can't do that anymore, and maybe not for some time to come. So people who would normally just do that sort of default action, perhaps a percentage of them will be more incited to do local events. And especially if there's some sort of platform that's not meetup.com that's promoting, local events and acting as an aggregator for it, and not just, a ticket selling platform, but maybe something that's really showcasing and something that's, giving and inspiring people and giving them a toolkit. I don't know, I'm just, talking off the top of my head here, but something that will really incite people to do local events, and more than that, give them the tools and help to set them up for success. That could be huge. That could be a huge. Note to self: startup.
I think that local events will also need sponsoring, because I remember I was sponsoring like a very small events, even if it was just giving them a space to gather and a stable internet connection for all on some Niblis. And I think this was also a part of why these events were happening, is because they were engaging with some companies that the attendees were interested in, and they had this benefits that is very social. And I think that if they happen again, this is gonna be, I don't know, really, to be honest and to talk for me, I definitely want to go back to in-person events, but I can't afford to be at the event where a cluster starts, So yes, I'm still thinking on that, and definitely would be super happy to have your thought on that.
I'm with like local events with being sponsoring and like it being hyper local. I have major concerns that money will not exist. Because like the ROI when it comes to running events at all or being involved with events is most of the time a crapshoot. Like you could have an event where it's like you convert every single person, and then you'll have an event where you don't have anybody who wants to be involved or anyone who cares about what you're doing. And hyperlocal is very like could be even more of a coin flip on those things, and you don't have nearly as much of a ability to measure or have track record or things like that. Like the attractiveness of something like a reInvent or some of these major conferences is like it's happened every year. You have the track record. You know what's going to happen. Everybody from the industry goes there. That means all the power brokers from the companies are all going to be there. All of the lead engineers are all going to be there, and all those things. And understanding the value prop for going and talking or being involved with a small local or a hyper local thing is going to be very interesting, because if maybe one person at that thing is what you need, and if that's true, then sure. But at least, like, because I have to work very closely with our finance team, if someone wants us to sponsor something, it's like a 2 to 3 month like Coupa hell for me to do that. And if I do multiple small events, that's like 6 times I have to go through Coupa versus like one big payment system. And so like I am incentivized for my own mental health to do one event rather than 6, even if it's the same price.
Yeah. I have so many thoughts on this. So fundamentally, the cost thing is really interesting, because events are one area that, I don't know, my experience has been that like you don't necessarily, as an event, in terms of event costs, you don't necessarily benefit from scale, in that, like, you know, there are definite breakpoints where cost goes off the rails in exponential fashions, right? Like moving from, you know, hey, our meetup fits in free sponsored office space to now we have to book a conference venue, to like now we're in like a conference venue that's dry hire. There are like some crazy ramps, right? So I think it's interesting, like when you look at hyperlocal at scale, there's enough hyperlocal events to replace your need for big conferences. I do wonder actually if like actually that works out to lower sponsorship costs, just because I think the cost of events will be lower. Sorry, I'm seeing some chat. I'm just making sure.
I'm just
Go ahead, Val. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. Ramon, the Coupa thing is a software we tend to use in DevRel, and it's written COUPA.
Cool.
It's like every company has their own like financial purchasing process. The bigger the company, the more difficult it is to spend money without oversight. And so like the minimum, like if I had every executive on the line and agreed to do something that I could, like, in its time box is like that I could get something paid for is 2 weeks. And that would be for everybody from my manager to the CEO ready to sign at a moment's notice, which is never going to happen.
And this is the other thing that I was really interested in, because it sounds like your system is probably on the extreme end, but I've definitely worked at a bunch of companies where, you know, like we have these breakpoints where like, okay, cool, the sponsorship's over 10K, it now needs to go through procurement, needs a contract, blah, blah, blah. And like, you know, I have definitely participated in systems where it's like, hey, if you can get us multiple billing under these amounts, I can put it on a card today, versus, you know, having to go through those systems. So that's another advantage of hyperlocal that I actually think, Gene, for a lot of people, it would help them avoid the experience you have to deal with for everything. Where like if you can keep it under, you know, those breakpoints. Like there are certain events that like even if we have the budget, we can't, like I've worked at companies who couldn't sponsor it because now it has to go through legal, it's going to take 6 months. Whereas like if you manage to get it down to under those breakpoints, it's something that becomes feasible. So that's like very attractive to me. So I guess why I'm going with this is like I think hyperlocal will be interesting in that I think it would take advantage of the fact that event costs, in my experience, and I'd love to hear if this is true for other people, aren't linear, they are exponential. And then in general, I think they'll be accessible for more DevRel sponsors who are able to, you know, easily stick things on a card, but when you get to procurements, it's a lot more difficult.
This is a big part of the reason why I invoked user groups, you know, when I sort of started this whole discussion, right? Because again, we're talking about material differences, right? There's a difference between a reInvent and a user group, and obviously 2 ends of the extreme, but there's also a difference between a formal conference, an event happening in some sort of event space with 500 or 600 attendees. That could still actually be hyper local, right? Very, very easily, versus, you know, literally just getting 20, 30, 40, you know, 50 people, you know, into a space chit-chatting, have some speakers on a television, and there's value there too, frankly. And I can tell you, as someone who's had to manage these, as we probably all have had to manage these budgets, sponsorship budgets, that I have personally and also organizationally had way fewer questions around the value of throwing 200 euros for pizza and drinks at a local event than throwing 2,000 euros at something a bit more formal. That's way harder, right? And it's not even a question of purchasing. It's not even a question of invoices, although of course it's always a question of purchasing and invoices. It's literally a question of justification, right? And again, that word, that phrase again, value proposition, right? It's easier to be, as a brand name, it's easier to build the goodwill on that small group for a fairly small amount of money, right, than it is to get that same level of value in terms of just renting space in people's heads at a mid-sized conference for what is proportionally a lot more money, right? And I think that becomes one of the other interesting propositions of something that's small and hyperlocal, is you're spending less money and potentially getting an outsized impact for that spend, despite the fact that it's much smaller.
I guess this is where the crapshoot that you referred to, Gene, comes in. If the potential for the outside impact is there, on the other hand, like if it doesn't work out, the pool of people is small enough that like your pool of applicable lottery tickets is lower, I guess, is where I'm
yeah. I would expect that at least for the foreseeable future, we'll see major companies or people with that have systems where they have to do payments and stuff like that, and it's a pain in the ass, or or just larger companies in general will end up passing on doing a lot of these events for the next year or two, and watch startups who can be more nimble, whatever, and see what's working for them, and then copy it 100%. But there will be a dry up of money from the Fortune 500, etc. Space in the DevRel sponsorship.
Unmute. We're already seeing that, right? The writing's on the wall there. I think you're bang on with that. I guess then maybe the question then is, the question maybe there is that a permanent thing or not, right? Is that well just gone dry?
Yeah, that's the scary thing of, hey, if we can prove we've gotten the value without doing these events at this point, why do it again? Because realistically, the people that you've hired who were going to be doing these events have been tasked for doing other things, or they have new responsibilities, or they've left the company. And it's well, do we rehire or do we find different methods? Because this may lead to us discovering that stuff other than events is more valuable.
I definitely agree with that. But as I'm saying this, I'm I don't know if I actually. So the thing that I've found great alternate solace in from events has been streaming. And so that straight away it feels weird because I'm this gets back to the thing we started with Dan, which is to what extent are these things not events or not events, right? But yeah, I think where I found great value in things like streaming is almost back to some old Rob Spector, Twilio-esque stuff where it's getting additional bang for your buck, where it's I've been doing lots of streams, but they're not necessarily bespoke content for that stream. It's hey, what was something I needed to do anyway that someone might be interested in watching? I'm just going to go do it in public, and if they watch, that's great. If they don't, I got the thing done anyway. And so I think that's been really useful in being able to keep up some of what I found valuable about events, whilst not worrying too much about the value of that activity in its own right.
There was also this super interesting comment that you pinned before from Susan saying it's about being here, being consistent. And I also think this is the reason why we used to sponsor events, definitely. In my personal experience, I know that the companies that have always been with me since I was in my IT school, I just get this little affection for them, and this is nothing rational about it. And for the longer a company is around you and taking care of you, it's definitely something that is building a relation. And we can't just don't build that for 2 years, or we can't be that friend that disappears for 2 years before the world is back again as it was. So
Yeah, I agree. It's the relationship thing again, and I don't know. For some, is that relationship worth it? Going back to, I think what Gene was saying, like the big Fortune 500s, maybe they can do without that, and that well might surely be dry. But startups, a lot of them, I guess, and I can definitely like attest to that myself. There's companies that I have built that relationship with, and I'm like, I still use them because of stuff that happened in a couple years ago in college. And yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. I I don't know. I mean, I'll be probably in the thick of things and probably have to come out of it a year later and think about everything that changed and that's going to happen. So I'm looking forward to having my mind changed, but I feel like it's it's definitely going to be an experience.
So Laurent's in chat, and he mentioned I won't say the name out loud, but there's a well-known company that got rid of their DevRel team, and they didn't have DevRel for a while. And then they rehired and did it all over again. And that's a prescient comment because it speaks to this idea of cycles, right? Everything is cyclical, everything, and we could descend into a big philosophical discussion about the nature of time and so on and so forth. But technology is the same thing, right? It's not the first time we've done the cloud, right? Anybody here ever used a mainframe, right? Buying compute time, so on and so forth. Showing my age here a bit, but if we talk about the cycle of, okay, we're going to maybe cycle away from a particular format for a while. We're going to cycle away from a particular technology for a while. We're going to cycle away from a particular way of interacting with community and thinking about what our product is and how we sell and how we buy. And that's fine and true and good because that's when evolution happens, right? But it's going to cycle back, right? Maybe we're not going to do conferences for a while. Maybe that's okay. Maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we need to take a break. But they're going to come back. People are going to want to get together. People are going to want to hang out and stand in a friggin' lunch line and go out and get obnoxiously drunk afterwards. And this is just a fact, right? That conferences are more than just going and sitting in a classroom and taking notes. There's social events. There are, in some cases, perks that get handed out as rewards, like reInvent. Ton of companies will hand out all expenses paid trips to reInvent as like, you hit your quotas, you hit your targets, you're in the top X%, you're going to reInvent, buddy, right? That's not going to go away.
That's not a reward.
It depends what side of the equation you're on.
For us, we have our world championship instead of reInvent, and that is a reward.
I mean, I'm just picking one, right? But so I mean, cycling away from these things or cycling away from models that we became comfortable with, perhaps even complacent for a number of years. I'm not saying that, oh yeah, well, this is the great thing about COVID, like, are you kidding me? But change is normal and evolution is a natural thing. And what we're seeing now is both of those things, right? The question is where's it going to go and how much control over it do we have? How much control over it should we have, right? We're DevRel professionals. This is our world. What are we doing now today that's going to set us up both personally, right? Because you got to get that cheddar, want to get that nice retirement someday, but also just in this thing that we love, which is just getting out there and being community people and interacting and teaching and learning. All this stuff that drives us. What are we doing now that's setting us up to continue to be able to do that?
Yeah, I was about to ask that. How much influence do we have in how quick this cycle comes back and where the cycle goes?
I hope not too much, because based on DevRel Twitter and other things, I've seen a lot of people who are willing to risk a lot of people's lives to get back into conferences and seeing people and stuff like that, which is a little terrifying.
I mean, unless you're in New Zealand, in which case, crazy go nuts.
Oh yeah,
Conference to your heart's
good.
delight. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that is a fantastic place to put a pin in it for this time. So I want to take the opportunity before Don comes back on and sees us out to thank the guests who have jumped in here with us and of course in chat. Thank you, Gene. Thank you, Daniel. And thank you to everyone in chat who has kept the conversation going over there. I believe we're all going to be banished to the back room now whilst Don comes in and says goodbye. So thank you all so much.
Well, I'm
Thank
not
you
going to
very
kick you off
much.
just yet.
Oh, okay. We're not going yet.
Oh.
Hi, Don.
No, I just wanted to say some thank yous. Thank you, everybody, Gene, Daniel, Joe, Val, Dan, for making this a really delightful show. And thank you to everybody in the comments. We've had a number of things going on there. Suzanne Daniels, Laurent, and others who have participated in the chat. We really appreciate your contributions to this. Hopefully,
And of course, thank you, Ramon, for the live transcription.
I was getting to that. Ramon, you have once again been the silent hero of the show. Thank you for using CoScreen to help me with the note taking. These will go up on GitHub after the show, and we'll have a link on Twitter. If you don't follow the DevRel Salon on Twitter, you can always get announcements for upcoming shows there. If you have an idea for a topic, or you just want to be on the show, or just have something you want to have a conversation around with other DevRel professionals, please hit us up there and drop us your suggestions. 2 weeks. We're doing this fortnightly. This is the second one, so the next one will be on. Where is the? Oh, Ramon wants to say something on the 25th of February. Let's bring Ramon on to take a bow.
Just wanted to say hi and thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Hello, Ramon. Thank you very much.
It was a lot of fun and I learned a lot. Thank you.
Where are these notes published? Don, I may have just missed you say that. But
Yeah, they're on GitHub. Let me see real quick if I can find the without breaking anything. Yes, here we are. So I'm just dropping this in the chat for everybody, but of course we'll share this on Twitter and in the show notes afterwards for folks who come back here. It's on github.com/DevRel Salon /conversation_notes. Watch for EP02.md to drop tomorrow.
perfect.
All right. Well, thank you all again. I'm going to dance you all out. Have a good evening, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are.
So long.
Bye-bye.